You know, this is the new theme for the January year for the youth. Rocks. I wonder what it could be.
Trail marker.
A trail marker, yeah, they call those
Cairns.
a cairn. We can do all things in Christ. That even means the math test. Now, it's interesting in the last conference that President Nelson, speaking of your day, said the following.
We are presently living in what surely is a most complicated time in the history of the world.
And so here it is, the most complicated time. That's not your fault. It's not even fair. But that's the reality. That's what you get to face is a more complicated time than I had to face. Well, here we are in a complicated time in need of a cairn, because here we are trying to find our way and the trail splits and you wonder where we're going. And President Nelson said the following.
Knowledge of your identity will determine your destination and the joy of your journey. Number 1, you are a child of God. 2, you are a child of the covenant. And 3, you are a disciple of Jesus Christ. President Nelson.
What words jump out at you? Yes.
Knowledge of your identity will determine your destination.
Boy, that jumps out at me too. If you know who you are, it'll determine where you end up. Anybody interested in knowing who they are? So we need to learn what the cairn is and how to get there and who in the world we are. That's kind of the challenge tonight. And because Christ is the cairn, we'd better know his doctrine, don't you think? If we want to be disciples of Christ, Nephi defined for us the 6 things that he called the doctrine of Christ. Just like the 4th article of faith, except somebody cheated. There are 6 of them up here. How come? Well, because Nephi said so. In fact, it's not Nephi here, it's the voice of the Father saying we better add endure to the end. There's something else you probably didn't notice.
The temple one?
Yeah, why is that up there? Do you see the word temple anywhere here?
The temple, the straight and narrow path.
I wonder what it has to do with a straight path.
The closest place to Heavenly Father you can get on me.
Excellent. It is. It is. And hopefully you felt that as you've come around the temple. Do you notice anything else? What's the proportion of principles to ordinances? Are there just as many principles as ordinances? There are. It's 1 to 1. Do you think they have anything to do with each other? We're going to find out, in fact, that you can't live the principle unless you have the ordinance. So when the Father says, yep, you got to endure to the end, what do we need? Well, we need the ordinance that goes with it. That's where that comes in. You and I can't endure to the end without the temple, the straight path. The word temple, it comes from the Hebrew meaning to endure. So it's fitting that the temple would be the way we endure to the end, wouldn't it? It also means to overcome and have power. That says a lot about the temple. And anciently, this is what the temple looked like. Because they had to travel. It was a tent that they could set up. It was a traveling temple. But when they made the Solomon's temple, they did the same pattern because the pattern was given by God. Now, he didn't give Moses a drawing. He showed him the universe and said, this is what I want the temple to look like. With celestial, terrestrial, and yeah, that's what I want the temple to be like so that you get to travel. What kind of world are we on? Telestial. We're in a telestial world. And so we want to move from telestial up to celestial, obviously. That's kind of our goal. And so when we think of this little scout tent, this place of covenants and ordinances, Elder Uchtdorf, trying to help us understand covenants, said the following.
Your covenants with him give you a special connection with him. The kind of connection the scriptures describe as being yoked together so that with his help you can carry any burden.
In the temple we just were released from, we got to serve in the visitors center here in Paris. That's the Paris temple. In the visitors center, there's this beautiful model that looks just like the temple. And visitors would go, wait a minute, This doesn't look like a cathedral. We'd say, no, this is a school. And as a result, there are classrooms in this school, but they're arranged in a special way so that you start in number 1 and you move through. And then we'd ask them, what difference do you notice between room 1 and room 2? And so we start in the world. That's where we are, in the telestial world, isn't it? And then you're supposed to move, and what do you notice about room 2? What color are the walls? They're white, because this room is symbolizing walking in from the world here into a higher and holier place. In the Solomon's temple, or here's the inside of what that tent looks like that we saw to start with. And what do you notice?
It's kind of compared to the
same 3 rooms, isn't it? Exactly the same 3 rooms. So that we start in the world, and then if we learn how to simulate walking into a holier terrestrial existence. And so we would tell them, in this room, we learn to live in the world without becoming like the world. One woman was standing there from another religion, and she asked that question, and I said, well, here's where we learn to live in the world without being like the world. And then we learn to move over into this room, where you'll notice it's a lot lighter and it's white and pure, is the symbolism, so that we can live in our families and with our friends in this higher and holier life. That's what God intended for us. It's kind of like the Garden of Eden. And she turned to her husband and she said, honey, isn't that what we want? And I kind of nodded, and he says, well, yeah, it is, dear. And she turned back to me and she said, can we enroll in these classes? I says, well, could we talk about that as soon as we're done with your tour? And she says, please do. Of this, Elder Bednar said the following.
Across the generations, from the prophet Joseph Smith to President Russell M. Nelson, the doctrinal purposes of temple ordinances and covenants have been taught extensively by church leaders. The law of obedience, the law of sacrifice, the law of the gospel, the law of chastity, and the law of consecration.
Well, we could talk about each of these laws, but you'll notice that they progress right up to preparing us to go through the veil and into the presence or the throne of God. Now, today I want to talk about this space. This is the space where we would like to live our earthly existence. This is your future. This is the millennium, when Christ will reign again on the earth. That's pretty exciting. So we want to learn how to live these laws. So I'd like today, under the direction of your bishop, to talk about this law that was symbolized anciently by a big old menorah, the law of chastity. Now, what in the world does a menorah have to do with the law of chastity? That's what we're going to try to figure out. Kind of interesting. The menorah wasn't just a lampstand that burned olive oil in the cups up here. That's what it did, so it gave light to that whole space. But you'll notice on the branches are these little weird things.
flowers.
That's what they look like, is flowers. And in fact, the book of Deuteronomy tells us that those are almond flowers. So this is not just a lampstand, it's a symbol of an almond tree. Yeah. And I asked, why? Why would the almond tree represent the law of chastity? That's weird. So I went and looked up almond trees on Google. Google knows everything, right?
Yeah.
And what I found out was that the almond tree was the first tree that bears fruit in Israel. Then in the scriptures, I ran into this phrase, that Christ is the first fruits of the resurrection in the book of Corinthians. So whose tree is this?
Jesus.
This is a Christ tree. Yeah. Now, you'd never know that unless you started to wonder about the symbol, right? That's what you have to do in the temple. And so wondering about it and finding out that this was a Christ tree, I stumbled onto another reference to the Christ tree in Acts. And you know what Paul called it? He called it the cross. And then he said to his apostles, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross Did you know that he requires us to carry our cross in this life? Whoa. Now that's the symbol of what we have to carry. What is it that we're really carrying? Let's read the last paragraph.
And now for a man to take up his cross is to deny himself all ungodliness and every worldly lust and keep my commandments.
That's what he calls your cross. Is it heavy?
Yes.
Yeah. And this world is making it heavier all the time, isn't it? You almost can't turn on the television or go to a movie without your cross getting heavier. And yet, that's what he requires of us. And you heard in the last conference, President Nelson say, he overcame the world, but now he expects you to. Didn't you hear that? Yeah. So we'd better figure out how that's done and why it's so heavy. There's another reason that links this to chastity. How many branches?
7.
Yeah. What does 7 mean in Hebrew?
Complete.
Or complete, yeah, because it's like the creation. But it's not only 7 meaning perfect or complete, all the numbers meant something. So you think of 7, I think of 3, which means man, and guess what 4 means? Woman. Now you understand why the menorah, with all of its intricacies, has something to do with the law of chastity. So this becomes part of our guide to understanding why the law of chastity is more than just something we can't do. Now when we look at it in those terms and understand that the law of chastity has all sorts of powerful meanings, President Packer teaches us.
Protect and guard your gift. Your actual happiness is at stake. Eternal family life, now only in your anticipation and dreams, can be achieved because our Heavenly Father has bestowed this choicest gift of all upon you, this power of creation. It is the very key to happiness.
Can you even imagine your children? No, I couldn't either at your age. I couldn't imagine at all. My oldest daughter is here tonight. I could have never imagined this beautiful girl being one of mine, ever. And yet, you've got kids waiting for you. And the very key to your happiness is your capacity to do what only 2 beings in the whole universe can do. Celestial beings and mortals. And that's to create life. That's a power beyond any words that we could use tonight. That's why it's sacred. And it is the key to happiness, I promise you. The best definition for the law of chastity is right here. It's the Proclamation on the family. My suggestion to you is, since this defines the very key to your happiness, that maybe it would be a good thing to go home and memorize. The problem is if you were to go on Facebook or Twitter or any of the other social media, you wouldn't find this looking pretty, it's kind of darkened today. You wouldn't even be able to read it, let alone believe it. One doctor called it the fearsome power of social media. That wasn't the first social media that you have on your computer, Facebook, no. It was right back here. Adam and Eve were Grandma and Grandpa Adam and Eve by this time. And they had just learned from an angel about Christ. So they decided to hold a family home evening. And this is what happened.
And Satan came among them, saying, I am also a son of God. And he commanded them, saying, believe it not.
In other words, give it a dislike. Right?
Yeah. And they believed it not. And they loved Satan more than
Right?
God.
Whoa!
And men began from that time forth to be carnal, sensual, and devilish.
Can you believe that? Mom and Dad, Grandma and Grandpa teaching this awesome lesson on Christ, and Satan comes and just whispers this little thing. Now, why in the world would they believe it? Why would they turn and like Satan more? The clue is in these three words.
Sensual and devilish.
Yeah, we better look at those individually. Now, is carnal evil?
Yeah.
Carnal is natural. That's what you were born. You were born natural. You were born carnal. In fact, Adam had a hard time with that, and the Lord had to say, Adam, look. You're going to have children, and they're going to be just like you. Horses have horses, not cats. So because you are carnal, your kids are going to be carnal. That's it. No, they're not going to be cats. That's not the evil part. Carnal, in essence, means we have normal human appetites. We get curious. We have imagination, don't we?
Hungry.
Well, yeah. How many are hungry most of the time? All of them are, okay, not all guys, but almost. Power. We like control. Possessions. How many like to get something new? You know it.
Laziness.
Recognition. Yeah. How many like to have friends? Boy, me too. And reproduction. We're talking about the law of chastity tonight, so that's another one, yeah.
And laziness.
That's normal. That's the natural man. That's not the problem. What we need to understand is that this has something to do more than just with our noses and our eyes. This has to do with our brains. And each of those appetites has a place in the brain that receives the data. How many just got hungry? How many like to eat? Okay, now here, do me a favor. Leave your hand up if you like to eat. If the only reason you eat is to survive, lower your hand. Oh. How come the rest of your hands are still up?
Are you good?
Ice cream. Because you love to eat, right? It isn't just a chemical experience, it's a yummy experience. Right? Yeah. The senses, the appetites, stimulate the senses. And we like sense stimulation a whole lot. In fact, a lot of us will do almost anything for a good sense stimulation. And the problem is that likes can turn into
Craze.
and can turn into,
Can't
and you
resist.
know where that goes, don't you?
You automatically.
It can just do it, because what we do. Because rolling around in our brains are these other chemicals. And it isn't just that we get visual stimulation, light. It's that one of these goes off, this one maybe, and this one says, yummy. And this one up here says, happy. We're such chemical beings, it's surprising how much chemicals control us. But once you know that, it becomes powerful. This one here, and I've only listed 3 of them, there's several of them, but this one here is often called the bonding hormone. This is the one that makes a mother and her child bonded so much that the mother would give her life for her child. She'll rip that door off the burning Cadillac and jump in the fire and save her baby because she's bonded to the baby. That's what couples are supposed to have, is bonded together. And that's all surrounding this chemical. Now, there's a problem. We need to notice that the carnal man can then become so habituated to stimulating senses that something starts to happen. We see and hear and taste one of those, and that says, ooh, that has meaning. That really looks good. And it kind of rings around in our head, and then it moves from our head to our heart, and we start to feel and desire it, and then we act on it. And then as we act on it, we want more, so we repeat it, and then we repeat it again, And you know where that leads. But what we don't understand a lot of times is that this state of addiction actually changes our body. It changes our brain. Here's your brain cut in half. And here's the control part up here, but there's another part of your brain that's the middle part of your brain, and sometimes it's called the animal brain. It's where you react to things. Well, unfortunately, with enough repetition in addiction, the control center actually becomes weaker and weaker. And you're left with this part of your brain. Now, I don't mean physically, because fortunately we can overcome this, but I do mean functionally. So that you're driven and your monkey becomes not just a monkey, an angry monkey. In other words, you're so addicted now, nothing's going to get in your way. And literally, people kill to fill their addictions, or steal, or hurt others. Yeah. That's a diseased brain. And an addicted brain is a diseased brain. And you can get addicted to food. Yeah. Like one of the biggest brain changes, we can look on brain scans and see a food-addicted brain. Do you know what's more addictive than the cocaine? Sugar.
Oh, yes.
So what we're saying is in understanding our bodies becomes a key to understanding how it is that if we're ever going to be successful in following Christ's doctrine, we've got to understand this body. Because right now, with my animal brain roaring, because I want another piece of strawberry shortcake after 5 or 6, I'm beginning to wonder if my body is a gift or if it's an anchor. Is it hurting me or helping me? Getting a body is like getting a puppy. If you don't train it, it'll destroy everything you ever like. But if you train it, Brigham Young said it this way.
Brigham Young stated, the devil does not hold any power over man, only so far as the body overcomes the spirit that is in a man.
So what's the key? Who do you want to be in the driver's seat, your body or your spirit? Did you know the last time you fasted, what you were doing was you're telling your body, you're not running the show? Let me show you why that gets to be so important. As we move from carnal to sensual, it becomes scary. Notice now from Father Lehi. What is it that gives the devil power to captivate us? Don't choose.
According to the will of the flesh.
Wait a minute, what's the will of the flesh? It's our carnal nature. With our love for sensation. So, the will of the flesh and the
evil which is therein, which gives the spirit of the devil power to captivate.
Wow. Satan has no power over us unless we let our bodies run the show. That makes sense?
So
Fasting is a great exercise. It's spiritual push-ups. So here you are hanging out, and your appetites are handles that give Satan power to captivate. The trick is to keep our handles small and manageable. So, hanging out in the universe, some of your appetites have grown pretty big. Maybe it's your appetite for social media. I just have to look to see if somebody commented. Maybe it's whatever. Maybe it's video game. Whatever it is. Some of them are bigger than others, and some of them are smaller than others, and Satan's looking for the easiest one to grab he can because he's lazy too. And so he looks for the big growing handles, those carnal appetites that are starting to turn into sensations, because he knows if he can get a hold of you, like a 2-ton bull, a 3-year-old could lead you around and make you do what he wants to. And he wants to. Now, fortunately, Heavenly Father says, No, these are my children. I love them. So I'm going to show them how to keep you behind locked doors. And so he gives us all of these locked doors. We don't call them locked doors. What do we call them? Commandments. Only commandments is a word that makes it sound like he's trying to keep us from doing stuff. Instead, he's trying to keep Satan from doing stuff. That's a different way to look at commandments. And the nice thing is all those doors are locked. So if he beats on them, kicks at them, they won't open. You can bump up against them accidentally on your computer, and that door won't open. Do you know what keeps them locked?
A key.
A key. Do you know what that key is?
Spirit. Obedience.
Obedience to that commandment. As long as you obey the commandment, that door will stay locked, and you can bump up against it accidentally, and it will not open. Unfortunately, the key that will open it is in your pocket. It's those appetites again. You know, I've never looked at it. I've always wondered what it's like. I just want to see.
Ouch.
Once the door has been unlocked, you can close it through repentance, but you probably won't ever be able to lock it again. That's the bad news. The good news is Christ is there to help, but once you've opened that door, it becomes harder to resist the temptation. I had a medical student come to me when I taught at the medical school, and he said, I need help. I've been to my bishop and my stake president. I have a pornography problem, and I can't stop. And I said, oh, can't? He says, yeah, I can't. I said, you opened the door, didn't you? He says, what do you mean? I showed him this. He went, that's me. You remember the Lamanites in the Book of Mormon? What did they have to do to keep from loving shedding blood?
Bury their weapons?
Yeah. They had to bury their weapons. That's what I told this medical doctor. Oh, you're going to have to live without the internet, I guess. He went, I can't do it, because he had opened the door. It makes it harder. So don't open the door if you haven't yet. And if you have, go get help. Whatever the door is. Because we need each other. And thank goodness for good bishops who can help. In fact, Joseph Smith says, everybody who has a body has power over. No, wait a minute. We just saw that the body gives Satan access to us. Right?
If you let it.
If we grow our appetites, and who can help but not grow our appetites? I mean, we like to eat, right? I mean, they're going to happen. And we're going to grow some appetites, and Satan's going to do all he can to grab a hold and use them. All he can. Unless we learn how to use the body to have power over him. So here's the question is how do we do that? How can I turn my chemical-prone body into one that has power over somebody who wants to destroy me? I'll tell you a person who knew. You know who that is?
Moroni?
Captain Moroni.
Captain Moroni.
That's my middle name.
He knew how to use the body. See, he watched his people for generations fall and then repent, and then fall and then repent. They went after the kingmen, and then they went after, and then they went after, and it just got so irritating that he wrote his solution on a flag and took it around and posted it on the internet for everybody to read.
Yeah.
Should we read it?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead. Let me take you so that you make sense out of what he wrote to a night when your mom and dad said, I want you to stay home. We're all going out. It'll just be you and your little, let's say you have a baby sister or baby brother. And you're watching a TV program and doing your thing, and it's, things are going okay. The baby's asleep. All of a sudden you hear breaking glass and a crash from the baby's room, and you run into the room. Your fight or flight is going crazy because you don't know what could possibly cause that noise. So your chemicals are running high, and you're faster than you ever were before, and you're stronger than you ever were before, and you throw the door open, and there through a broken window stands a guy with a mask, and he's reaching for your baby sister. What would you do?
Punch her.
Now, if you were black belt, where's our black belt? Yeah, if you were black belt, you'd know just exactly what to do, because you're a trained warrior. But most of us aren't trained warriors, but our chemistry says
Fight.
Punch him in the
you
nose.
fight or run, one of the two.
Fight.
You would either grab the baby and run as fast as you can, or you'd punch him in the nose.
And then grab the baby.
We call that warrior chemistry. Your body knows how to do warrior chemistry. And the next time you've got that little voice in your head saying, ooh, I really want to taste that. And you know you shouldn't. But your buddy is saying, hey, it's okay. Get your warrior chemistry going. And this is what he wrote on the flag. In memory of our God, our religion and freedom, our peace, our lives, our children. He could have written, and our little brothers and sisters. In other words, he took them from the yumminess of what they're being tempted to do to the consequence of where it would lead. And in spite of the fact that sometimes we think we can escape the consequence, the bad news is we can't. You can't pick up one end of the stick without getting the other. Sorry. So if you can think about that end of the stick, the consequence, it'll raise your warrior mentality, and you'll realize that somebody is trying to take from you something you value. And you'll rise in strength and you'll run. Now with that in mind, knowing that this is going to happen, no matter what we do, that's how the body is going to take us. And as we learn, practice, how much practice did it take to get a black belt?
7 years.
7 years. You want to be black belt spiritually? It's going to take that long and maybe more. Satan knows every trick and every move in the book. This is what he knows about your body, because he's got a lot of people whose bodies have failed. And he's learned from them, even though he doesn't have a body of his own. So as a result, you and I need to learn to understand how our brains think. When two people watch something happen, maybe it's a car accident, yeah, maybe it's the hatching of a chick, I don't know. The first thing they do is they form a perception. That means that they, in their mind, they see it and they give it meaning. And then once giving it meaning, they draw conclusions about it. He made me mad. Or any number of other conclusions we draw. And those conclusions ignite our feelings. So who makes us mad?
Ourselves.
Yeah. It's because this is what happens in our brains, whether we like it or not. It's what we do. Let me take you maybe to a night you're watching your babysitting again. It's just you, baby's asleep. You're sitting all alone watching a TV show. Mom and Dad said they'd be home. And all of a sudden, you hear steps. What do you think?
Mom and Dad.
Yeah. Now, what do you feel?
Scared. Happy.
But let's pretend just before you heard the footsteps in the garage door thing, that a banner went across the screen. You've seen those before? And it was an info banner. And it said, warning, escaped convict just in your neighborhood, armed, dangerous, close and lock all doors, don't let anyone in unless you know them. And then, the conclusions you draw bring the feelings. The footsteps don't have any meaning. It's what you perceive. Then lead to behaviors. Now, those behaviors come together over time and make our experiences, and guess what the experiences lead to? Yeah. The next time we hear a footstep, what comes to mind?
The bad guy's coming.
The bad guy's coming.
Yeah.
And over time, as that repeats in a cycle, those perceptions get anchored and anchored and anchored and anchored. And the perceptions of all that we see and do form what some have called our worldview, or our mental map. You see, we all see the world. We have a view of the world, and we think we know exactly what the world is. Because the only thing that knows the world is our senses. Our eye saw it. But what does it tell us? Data stream, data stream. And in our brain is this perception cycle. And whether it's sight or smell or sound or whatever it is, we start to do that, and we start to see the world. Here's the news. As we are instead of as it is. Could I say that one more time? We see the world as we are, not as it is. Next time your brother or your sister disagrees with you and you want to argue because you're sure you know what they mean, stop a minute and realize that it's what you think they mean, not what they really mean. It might help to listen and ask and question before getting the gorilla out. Make sense? Because we see the world as we are, not as it is. And in addition, our little world that we feel safe in, whoa, Section 38 tells us, powers of darkness prevail. We're winning. Even now, the Lord said. And it causes silence. Why are they prevailing? The section goes on. I'll show you a mystery. A thing which is had in secret chambers to bring a pass even your destruction in the process of time. Again, I say unto you that the enemy in secret chambers seeketh your life. So, what are we supposed to do?
Turn it on.
I can't show you until I teach you a phrase. The phrase is from the Book of Mormon, and we're looking at the revelation in the Doctrine and Covenants. Here's the Book of Mormon phrase. In the Book of Mormon, you remember Alma the Younger is walking along with his buddies to destroy the church, and what comes along? And the angel spake, as it were, with a
voice of thunder, which caused the earth to shake.
What was the angel's message? I have come to convince you. Did Alma the Younger and his buddies want to be convinced?
No.
Absolutely not. They were having too much fun destroying the church, and they were being successful at it. So the Lord sent an angel. That doesn't happen very often. So what that means when you read a voice that causes the earth to shake is that it's a voice that convinces you when you don't want to be convinced. What voice convinces us when we don't want to be convinced? Here's the rest of the section. That's coming from up here. He seeketh your life, and lest the wickedness of men reveal these things unto you by their wickedness, in a manner which shall speak in your ears with a voice louder than that which shall shake the earth. So that they won't, I'm going to give you a solution. I'm going to give you a key. That voice is what is all over today in our lives. It absorbs our lives. It's all the media you can think of. And it's engineered on purpose to convince you when you don't want to be convinced. A couple of campers decided because they were starved and out of food that they would take the frog they just found and cook it. They boiled the water, tossed the frog in. You know the story. He jumped right out. What are you going to do with a frog that won't cooperate?
You put it in the water and slowly turn up the heat.
Yeah, you put it in cold water and let it get warm slowly. We're all frogs because we've been being boiled. Let me just give you a sample. The Lord back in 1830 gave us the word of wisdom. He didn't use the word caffeine. Instead, he used principal words instead of specific chemical words. And those principal words were to teach us ideas about stuff that would come in the latter days because of the evil designs which exist in the hearts of conspiring men. See, the word of wisdom is really a conspiracy revelation to avoid conspiracies and what they want. What do they want? Control. Your money. Power. That's what they want. And so he said, okay, avoid caffeine because it is addictive. So the principle is avoid stuff that's addictive. He didn't say anything about sugar, but we know something today about it, don't we?
It's also addictive.
It's addictive. Yeah. So he starts you when you're really young. And then you go out through life and life. This is your future vision right here. You started young, and most of you are about right in here, and you're just growing through it. You'll reach college here pretty soon, and so on down the line. But what happens, and please don't hear me wrong, I am grateful for modern medicine and for the medications they provide for us. But when we begin for ear infections, for attention deficit syndrome, because we don't look like the model on TV, we can't stay awake to cram for our test, we're overwhelmed by kids and are anxious all the time, our heartburn is getting too bad, and on until we have to have a pill caddy to take all the pills. We become so reliant chemically. The third cause of disease today is drug-caused disease. Now maybe some of you aren't stuck in this cycle, but it's a boiling frog, and it's been at us for a long time. They started feeding cattle and chicken growth hormones to make them bigger and musclier so they could get more money out of each cow. You know what animal growth hormones do to human beings? It disturbs our hormones and how they work. Let's look at another one of the hormone disruptors. You familiar with BPA? BPA is the chemical that today makes up most of the plastics that we have. On one campus of about 2,500 individuals, they tested them. And in the process found that 93% had significant amounts of BPA in their urine. 93%. You can't avoid BPA today. They're a class of drugs called the endocrine disruptors. They're in our meat, they're in our fabric softeners, and they affect our hormones. They affect how our estrogens and our testosterones are, what makes us men and what makes us women, and so on and so on. And they are most powerful during prenatal and as we're young. Boiling frog? Yeah. The blue bars represent the plastic production in the world. The red line represents the obesity rate. The purple line represents diabetes and its rate. What are you noticing? It doesn't tell us that plastic causes diabetes, but it says that their growth and increase are associated somehow. Understanding that endocrine disruptors do what they do, that here's another line that may be interesting to you that relates to our law of chastity today.
Gender conflict, what?
Big news in social media today. There's a lot of people confused over their gender today. Legitimately speaking, see, when it was my age, we looked at people who were confused over their gender, and men tried to be women and women tried to be men as wicked people because they were making wicked choices. Today we need to understand that that's a chemical problem. There are people born in this world that are now victims of generations before them with endocrine disruptors. Unfortunately, believing you're a man trapped in a woman's body doesn't decrease your risk of uterine cancer. Ignoring biological sex is at our own risk, and yet science is saying, oh no, we can make the change, we can transform, right? Unfortunately, there's a scientific theory for everything. The reality is that we have to deal with the reality. And since we are chemical beings, if we don't understand that, we'll react to people inappropriately as well as our own wonderings. It isn't unusual for a 9-year-old to go, I like to play with girls and dolls better than I do with cars and tanks. And if somebody's not careful, they'll say, oh, maybe you're really a girl. Instead of realizing that at that age, they haven't hit puberty yet. They don't know what they are. They don't even know what it is. This doctor said, we need to come alongside those who are conflicted about their gender and compassionately help them and explore the reasons for their mental, physical disconnect. But we cannot allow culture to silence potential health issues with an award and a magazine cover. I fear for the gender conflicted who are told to proudly hoist a rainbow banner when deep down inside their emotional flag flies at half-mast. How do we know it's at half-mast? Because almost half of them have attempted suicide. That doesn't come from a happy day. It comes from depression because they lost who they were. Your identity determines your destination and the joy of your journey. Now, I don't believe that the time you were born determines what you're like, but I do believe that each generation has had some common experiences. Your great-grandparents were the traditionalists. They, because of the war and the Depression, had pretty low expectation about life. They were willing to do anything, and they were appreciative of it, always thankful. And they were highly loyal. Great citizens, great marriages, so on. Then my generation was born. And that generation had higher expectations. It was a new era, war was over, they were curious, so inventions were about to happen, and they were very loyal to each other and to anything they belonged to. Then my oldest kids were born. They had rather low expectation because they could see everything their parents had and the parents weren't giving it to them. But they had a high appetite. I want everything they have. And unfortunately, their loyalty started to drop. Then my younger kids were born, the millennials. They're big on personal freedom. They're socially liberal by most of them. But their loyalty rate, notice it dropped. And then along comes your generation. They are opinionated, critical, and very low loyalty. They're opinionated because they've got Google. They think they're right all the time. They're the ones that have to teach their parents and grandparents how to use their phone. Right? It's the first generation where the kids in some things were smarter than the parents. Well, when we take and we start to look at the boiling frog through the generations, we can see the experiences that they had. The great-grandparents moved from the farm to the city. Is that a change in worldview?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness, yes. And then my generation's born, along comes the personal computer. Most of us didn't learn how to program them, but it opened a window to the world like never before. I used to have to go to a library with a personal computer. I can not only read about it, I can see it. And then along comes the Gen X kids, mobile phone, the internet. Oh my goodness, what they could do and what happened to their world. Just expanded. And then along comes the millennials, and the millennials were social everything. Here comes Facebook and Twitter and da-da-da-da. And it's, what kind of a world paradigm does that bring? As you start to worry not about what's right or wrong, but about who likes me and who doesn't. And what's right is what everybody likes, and what's wrong is what nobody likes. And that becomes a real problem for us. And then comes yours, and we throw in gaming and virtual reality. We take the little tiny screen, we pop it up to a tablet, and wow, now it's really real to us. And then we throw it into virtual reality sets. And, wow. Now, is that evil? No. But does it change our worldview? Completely. So much so that unfortunately, people from these generations are having a hard time mentoring people in this generation. So it's hard to get guidance because we don't talk the same language. Our worldviews are so different. Elder Bednar gave a talk on that in 2010. Here's a question, or a guideline, some principles that will really help. Would you note these either in your phone or in your brain or on the bottom of your shoe, whichever comes first? Does my use of media invite or impede the Holy Ghost?
Yes.
Number 2, Does my use of media enlarge or restrict my capacity to live, love, and serve? You can look up a video that has him giving the talk, and while he's doing it, it's showing the first part, a guy in on his computer playing a game, doing his thing. And then it comes around, and it shows a guy, the same guy, this time having put his media aside, and he's in helping his little sister learn how to read. Now, what would you rather do? Be on the computer gaming, or helping your little sister learn how to read? Most of you'd rather just lunch out and game. It's a lot more fun, isn't it? The body likes it. There's dopamine going crazy. We're going, ooh, I love this. Get me a new one. And our spirits inside are crying for us to connect and love. As we start to understand that, is it having an effect on our society? Yeah. Notice the marriage rates down on the bottom. You notice what's happening to our ability to bond with each other in a marital relationship? The frog is boiling. Here's another one. Those that are non-heterosexual, in other words, those that have gender confusion, don't know whether they're a boy or a girl. At great-grandpa's age, they were 0.8%. 3 in my generation. And then gradually, today, 1 out of 5 people are confused with their gender. It's a chemical problem. It's not a wickedness problem. It's a chemical problem. And managing our chemistry is not easy. But it's possible. With and through He who gives us the power. Rapid onset gender dysphoria only diagnoses the fearsome power of social media. Please, dear brothers and sisters, know when you're on social media the dangers that are there. And don't buy into the like and dislike reality. The Proclamation on the Family teaches us the truth about who we are. Bishop asked me to look with you at paragraph 2. Would you read?
All human beings, male and female, are created in the image of God. Each is a beloved spirit, son or daughter of heavenly parents, and as such, each has a divine nature and destiny. Gender is an essential character of individual, premortal, mortal, and eternal identity and purpose.
What do you get out of that? Keisha?
Gender is very important.
Good. What else? Good. What else did you see? When were you made a girl or a boy?
Before birth.
Yeah. Your spirit is the same gender as your body. That's the truth. You see, on the internet, we get all sorts of things that claim to be the truth. And because of the social likes, it makes them seem true. America is racist. Historically. Oh no. So Black Lives Matter. You've heard all the media on that. Maybe it's hit your schools. I don't know. But the reality is all lives matter. That's the truth. The Book of Mormon teaches us that as clear as it can be. There's only 12% of all lives out there that are black. And they matter as much as all the others. But there's only 12% that are trying to drive the entire system. The cultural story needs to be written because, after all, George Washington had slaves. Well, so did every beginning and opening nation. And to rewrite history is to change values. That's where values come from, is our stories. Gender flexibility is a personal right. Constitutional. Gender is an eternal fixed identity, and there's only 7% out there that are gender confused. Why are they running all the movies and all the TV and all of the media? Because they want money. The Book of Mormon exposes that 2 things. If I can convert human life to money and power, that's the secret combination. You've been given, fortunately, a window to the truth. This is brand new. How many of you have a copy yet? This is brand new. It's just announced at conference. I know you've had it for Strength of Youth before, but this is all changed. It doesn't tell you what to do and what not to do. It tells you how to make choices. It gives you tools in the decision tree that will allow you to see the consequence before the appetite starts to rule the gorilla inside. Let me tell you a story in conclusion. This is Ben. Ben is a returned missionary. Before he left on his mission, he couldn't figure out why he didn't really care whether he went on a date. He didn't find girls particularly attractive. He hung out with the guys, he hung out with everybody. He just liked people. And when he went on his mission, he thought maybe everything had changed, so when he could come home, he could get married and have a family. That was his hope. He served a wonderful mission, and he came home from his wonderful mission, and it didn't change. He still didn't like girls. Well, he liked them as people, but he wasn't attracted to them at all. And he started to wonder if something was wrong with him, and he got some counseling, and he wondered, and in the process, in one of his classes, he ran into a young woman. He wasn't attracted to her, but they became friends. And in their friendship, she fell in love with him. And he was very open with her. I'm not attracted to you. She didn't care. Because they were such good friends. And they built on each other. And they just loved being together. But it wasn't from any attraction from his side. But as a result, in her willingness and wide open transparency, they got engaged. And as the day for marriage approached, it just felt so foreign in his brain, because it had been changed, that they finally called it off. He was pretty depressed because he didn't think he had a future. He thought it all done. He couldn't go on with the typical path to happiness that we talk about in the church. And in that depression, he and another buddy in school started to talk, and he realized that both of them had the same problem, and they were attracted to each other. And so, as they started talking about it, they started looking at their options. You know, I can't even tell you how wonderful this seems, they would say to each other. To have somebody that I not only love, but I feel loved by. And that I can fully disclose to and open to and so on. I just want that for all eternity. But I can't get married in the temple to do it. Ben had a great testimony of Christ. And his partner realized that and was willing to sacrifice his membership in the church to have a marriage with somebody he felt bonded to. But Ben couldn't do it because he knew Christ had given him a path to follow called the plan of happiness. And so his partner said, let's not do this. You won't be happy. And he said, you're right, I won't. So he sat down when he was done and decided, I've got to figure out what my options are in life because I'm not going through depression again like I did. It'll lead back to this same spot, and I don't want that. See, he's consequence thinking, if-then thinking. In the process, he came up with 3 realities from which he had to choose. The first was to go ahead and act on his feelings, have a romantic relationship with a man, and maybe get married and leave the church. Many gay people choose that option. Or marry a woman and try to live a normal life. According to many of Ben's acquaintances, however, this rarely works. Well, that's not totally true. Rarely is probably too big of a word. A lot of times it doesn't work. But it has worked. And there's some books out there written. His book is here if you want to read it. There are many books of those who have actually married according to the plan and found happiness in family and friendships and belonging. The romantic love is never fulfilled because chemically they're not able to. See how evil this chemical boiling frog really can be? The third one was just stop dating. Be happy with a celibate life for now. Put my life in the hands of God and let Him determine my tomorrow. That's what he finally did. His third option was the only acceptable choice. Having made his decision, he's now moving forward in the church, enjoying a personal relationship with God and Christ, and he feels that he's found his place in life and in the church. He works now for BYU. He's in the standards department at BYU and helps counsel those who are struggling with this chemical default. Remember? Christ said unto them, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross. How often?
Daily.
That's a different verse than the other one we saw. So in this version, we get the word daily. Yes, your cross will be heavy every day. Take it up. Deny yourself. Excite your warrior mentality. And say, go away, you that wants to destroy and make me unhappy. I know it would be yummy to taste that or to look at that, but I'm not giving in to your... You get the warrior mentality? Let it fire. Because your worthiness, your discipleship, and the fact of being saved is all tied to your ability to take up your cross. We knew when we came to earth that it would be hard. In fact, notice in the Doctrine and Covenants, you can't behold with your natural eyes at the present time the design of God concerning the things which shall come hereafter, and the glory which shall follow when?
After much tribulation.
That's hardship. That's carrying the cross. That's after getting difficulty. These folks that Elder Ballard talks about have a great cross to carry. It's different than your cross and my cross, but it's a cross nonetheless. The experience of same-sex attraction is a complex reality for many people. Bishop, would you finish that?
We need to listen to and understand what our LGBT brothers and sisters are feeling and experiencing. Certainly we must do better than we have done in the past so that all members feel that they have a spiritual home where their brothers and sisters love them and where they have a place to worship and serve God.
It's not what our cross is. It's how much can I help my friends carry theirs. Let's get out of the pot. Not boiling anymore. What is the big stone at the bottom? If Christ will become your foundation, then when anything else goes wrong, just like it did with Ben's, it'll pull you back. I've wondered, yes, sister.
There's been a lot of emphasis on denying ourselves. And it kind of sounds like a burden, right? Carrying the cross. But I came from outside the church, was a convert. And by not denying ourselves of those things, it creates a heavier cross to bear than denying ourselves.
Thank you for saying that.
And so I just would not want to leave with this thought of having this burden of denying ourselves all the time, because by denying those things that are ungodly, we open ourselves to blessings and a life so free of so many difficulties and problems.
Thank you. I was in the prison with some prisoners in a room about this same size. And over here sat a guy that was bald and had tattoos everywhere that he had skin. Pretty artistic. He was muscly and huge. The room was filled with people just like that. And they were all in jail for a long time. And I said to them, somebody once said that living the gospel's really hard. And the big guy with the tattoos and the bald head started to chuckle. And I turned to him and I said, you're laughing. Oh yeah. You want hard. Living the gospel hard? I'll tell you what's hard. Doing just what you need to end up here, where I've got no freedom. And another guy in the back, he said, "You want hard? I'll tell you hard. It's when I had to wave goodbye to my wife, wondering if she'd be there when I got out, knowing that I might never see my children again." And the 80-year-old said, "Yeah, my grandchildren won't even talk to me. My children won't let them even see me. You want hard? Yeah. Living the gospel is the easiest thing out there. In my desire to have my Karen lead me back to Christ and founding my life on Him who has the power to help me see clearly." What else? There's 7 stones here. What are the other 6? What would you put on those other 6 that helps guide you when the path disappears in front of you? Spirit?
Church, scriptures.
Scriptures, I definitely want to put on the list. The sacrament, church,
Prayer.
but the ordinances, yeah, prayer, definitely. I don't know what order you'd put these in. Do we really have a living prophet who sees clearly because he's a seer? I would put the church here because that's where the covenants are given. Oh, I know sometimes church is a pain and sometimes it's even boring. But that's because you go to church for you. What are we supposed to go to church for?
Jesus Christ.
Our covenant with Christ, which includes, what covenant do we make at baptism? To mourn with those who mourn. Church is not about me, it's about what I can do for you. And that would change how I go to church. And then maybe I could put my family up here. And then maybe I would throw in my personal scripture study and certainly prayer. Love God with all your heart, mind, and strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. The very cross